Must be agreeable.
So let's see, let's get an advantageous angle here. Woo. I might ask, let's see here. We might sort of shift so we're sort of looking in this direction so that, so this will be doing some participatory. That's okay.
I have one here. So I come here often, and my sister lives.
So you said
I went to the local bike shop a few years ago, and I
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Unfortunately, right now, it's
Please, you'll have it tomorrow.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Sarah.
oh, that's not good.
I know. I forget who won.
Yeah, great.
The one here is
So do you have a decent view of the room sort of?
I can see the whole room, yeah.
I
We're
wrote
gonna
back
give
here.
it like 2 more minutes and then we'll get started.
For some reason, you're the faintest person in the room that I can hear.
Oh, I don't know why. What about now?
I mean, that helped, yeah.
That's
All right, I'll just project.
Great. I might try my headphones too, see if that helps.
Okay. We'll give it about a minute more till 2:30 and then we'll go ahead and get started. If you didn't hear, there's coffee and some cookies by 677 if you need a jolt or something.
So I'll just tell you, there was someone that said they would call me by the end of the day, Eastern time, which is 4:30 now.
Okay.
So my two choices are either go on
Oh,
and sit somewhere hoping they called, or comment around the rest that I'll take a call. So you see me both from around.
well, we are glad you're here.
I'm just letting you know now.
So I shouldn't be utterly
So you-
offended when you like get off the storm off.
You're a rude guy.
Yeah.
Call comes in.
Was it something I said? Online communities aren't his thing, I guess. Hi. Okay. Well, I think we're good. Ready to get started, David?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right. Yeah, let's do it. Hey, John. So welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Pike, and I'm with ACE. And this is David Morgan. He is with Tessa, and he is joining us. He's currently in really the northeast area of the United States. We're going to talk about an online community. And with our proof of concept right here, we are creating a virtual experience of community. I'll just walk you through a little bit of what we're going to talk about and do today, and we'll hopefully have a very interactive session. So first of all, I'm going to tell you about what the concept is behind the online community, how we got to this point today. And then we're going to move into kind of more of a workshop where we're going to do some mapping of resources, try and match up some needs, and then really think about how we talk about the resources we need and how we actually create a community online and foster that relationship building. Maybe for the sake, would it be helpful maybe to introduce everyone in the room to you?
That sounds great. I see some.
Okay.
Supposed to be 2:30.
What's
You
that?
started early?
No, this says 2:30. That's okay. Okay. So why don't we just go around the room real quick? You just say your name and your organization. That'd be great. So, can I start here with Simon?
Hi, Simon Berge, University of Winnipeg.
I'm Kate Grant, I'm with the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation.
I'm Ellen Dodd with the University of Alberta.
John Mantelman, Northwest Cooperative Development Center.
Shar Breeze with Cooperative Network and the Minnesota Cooperative Education Foundation.
Jim White with the University of Wisconsin River Falls.
Madison Hopper with Alternate Credit Union.
Michaela Holmes, the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance.
Jessica, Geo, and it's Jessica Gordon. I'm right, so I already know him.
I'm Bob Cohen. I work with several cooperative and non-cooperative organizations in Ohio.
Adam Malloy, Ontario Cooperative Association.
Justin Ellerby, I'm on the board of CAS for one more day.
Oh my God. I'd be so happy.
And I'm Tim Hewitt with the Bay Area Cooperative Ecosystem.
Great. Well, thanks all for being here. So like I said, we're just going to start off. Oh, sorry. And we had one new person join. Sorry.
I'm Christy Joyce. I don't know what we're talking about, but I'm a
Who you
master's
are.
student.
Yeah. Who are you?
In Fargo, North Dakota, and I'm just doing my thesis on cooperatives.
Okay, wonderful. Great. So kind of how we got to where we are right now with this idea of an online community. When we were, come on in, we're just starting. Okay. So before I start, because I'm just about to start, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, just your name and your organization. And if you could quickly just say your name and your organization.
Girl Wing University.
Mm-hmm.
Hazel Corcoran, Canadian Worker Co-op Federation.
Okay. And Michael?
Further. And Center for the Study of Cooperatives.
Okay, perfect.
I
Thanks.
obviously sound like that, but these people are very good.
So, if you're familiar with ACE, we are a network of co-op educators, which is broadly defined as people that teach within co-ops, at the university level, co-op developers. And so it's a broad base, but it offers a great networking opportunity. And our main networking opportunity is at the ACE Institute. And there's a lot of dynamic conversation and collaboration, come on in this hall, that happens. Real quick, your name and your organization.
Your name. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. And your organization.
Center for the Study of Cooperatives.
Perfect. So there's a lot of great collaboration that happens at the ACE Institute, but then ultimately throughout the organization, or I'm sorry, throughout the year, the networking and the collaboration starts to dwindle. Sorry. Okay. Thanks. And so the idea and how we started to think about this was, how do you create a more dynamic networking opportunity throughout the entire year, when it's really our main focus was the ACE Institute, and we wanted to become a more dynamic organization. So we started to think about, or at ACE I should say, we started to think about what are the vehicles that we could use. You know, do we have other conferences? Do we sponsor other events? Do we have regional activities? But what we didn't want to lose is that North American-wide, multiple sector energy and networking that we have always offered. And so we really looked at how can we use technology and the internet and online sort of presence to really achieve what we were looking for. And so we really started to look into online communities. And one of the online communities that I found that I really got motivated by is called Test Connect. And it's actually just teachers, and they have about over 3 million members. And it's a resource that offers forums and resources and places to buy curriculum, and it really is a community in that there's constant chatter and collaboration. It's not static, it's very dynamic. And so I thought, well, how can we then implement this for ACE and really get this involved in our strategic plan? And so I went ahead and I wrote a grant to the Cooperative Foundation about this plan to create an online community. And in addition to that, through surveys that we had done, through our strategic planning process, we heard that people really wanted a resource library. So I had sort of added that as a component. Well, we got denied and we didn't get funding. And so we went back to the drawing board. And when I went and asked why we weren't funded, one of the reasons, well, there were really two main ones. The idea was a little hard to follow. And GEO had applied for something very similar. And GEO, who Jessica represents as well, is called Grassroots Economic Organizing. They also have a great online presence where they do a lot of their own publishing. They have a newsletter, and they offer a lot of rich resources. So we came together and we said, well, how can we really start to partner with this? Because the key to an online community is really participation. And it's not just ACE that really needs to be running this, or even our members, but the much broader cooperative community. So what does that even look like? But the more people that we can get connected and partnered with, the better and the richer and more valuable this online community really can be. And so then as we were chatting about this, you know, one of the other ideas and conversations that came up was looking at a great resource that is also online already called cultivate.coop. And that is something that Tessa has created and David is really working on now. And so we approached Tessa about this idea, and their reaction, they were very excited, but it was also, you know, we've already invested in some of this infrastructure. Why are you going to recreate something? So the theological thing is, well, why don't you become our partner then? Okay, wonderful. So now we have this team of ACE and GEO and Tessa, which really make up the core organizational team. But certainly one thing I want to stress now and throughout the entire presentation and workshop is we're looking for partners. We're looking for ways to really connect in other organizations. How do you want to be involved? How would you use it? How would you link your own online resource libraries? And so I'm going to turn it over to David, who's going to show us a little bit and talk to us a little bit about cultivate.coop, which is really the foundation of what we're looking at in terms of technology.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, good. So we started cultivate.coop back in 2010. It's been about 5.5 years since the launch. And as Sarah hinted at, it is a free digital resource. It's written by and for the cooperative community, and it is a place that shares all sorts of co-op knowledge on everything from bylaws to structure to culture and so on. So we intended Cultivate to be the very thing that this collaboration is driving at, and it wound up being a wonderful kind of serendipitous convergence to have everybody start talking about it in a formal and structured way over the course of the past year. So I'll share my screen and walk you through some of what Cultivate looks like now. We've changed it dramatically so that it has a new architecture, basically. Are you seeing Cultivate now on the screen?
Yep. Yeah.
All right, great.
Okay.
Oh. So we began about 4 months ago to restructure Cultivate into something that could house the sorts of information that would be coming into it by way of this collaboration. And that included a new look and feel. Everything that you're looking at is totally brand new. It also needed something like a taxonomy for all of the information that was going to be flowing into it. So we needed to devise categories and get organized with all of the information that existed. And I should back up and say that it's seeded already with the content that you see listed under guided tour here. There are categories for types of cooperatives, starting a cooperative, governance, and so on, that are our most popular articles. They're accessed rather several thousand times a month. And it's definitely already a hub of information with just the information that's been contributed to it by practitioners. And those practitioners are folks like yourselves, folks like me, who have been sharing their personal experiences and professional knowledge on Cultivate in order to provide this community with more resources about what cooperatives are and do. So some organizational backing has come from Cooperative Development Institute, also from Equal Exchange. We've had sort of this milieu of cooperative folks that are contributing to the site so far. So with the new information, we plan to use Cultivate as the platform for sharing more information. So as folks are contributing, let's say, white papers on bylaws, they could be listed in articles like the one I'm showing you now, with proper credit given to the authors, with further resources linked into the article. So, you know, if it happens to be dealing with credit union structures, you can parlay all of that information and direct a user over to the credit union page for a more general take on what credit unions are and do. And then perhaps down here in our references section, we have any number of other bits of information about credit unions that any one of you could have contributed. So with that, I think I will kick it back to you, Sarah. Does that make sense?
Sounds good, thanks.
Great.
So after we came together, we thought, well, how do we start? And so we applied for another grant as more of a collective between GEO, TESA, and ACE, and this time to CHS Foundation. And we were awarded $30,000 for a planning grant and over the course of the year. And our goals really are to look at really what it is we want to accomplish with the site and start to integrate those partners, and then also think about management structure. The key about an online community is not only is it used, but it's managed. And so what does that look like from a staffing perspective? What does that look like from a financial perspective? It's not one of those, you build it, they will come, and it pays for itself. So you really need to think about sort of that back end governance and financial aspect of it. And so that's another thing that we're talking about and thinking about over the course of the year. So some of our first actions that we've taken were to send out surveys to folks to ask them that we felt had a fairly robust online library, to find out what resources do you have, what are you looking for, what format are they in, to again think about from a technology standpoint, how do we start to connect these online resources. And one thing we stress is we don't want to recreate all of these on our site. We want to figure out how you link to them, because we believe that University of Wisconsin has a great library that's for their own constituency, or Democracy at Work Institute has a fantastic library that's really built for their constituency. So we don't want to take away what they're building, but we do want to, again, to connect, and so ultimately create a larger resource. And so with the survey, as I said, we're in the process of collecting information now, and David has mapped sort of our responses. And one of the things we're going to try and do today is really talk to you about resources you have, resources you need, and put that up on the map and try and think about the connections, and then walk through some exercises about, well, what did that activity just look like? How do partnerships form, and how does that happen online, especially if it's not something that you're used to doing already, in terms of that's how you cultivate your relationship. So we'd really like to figure out in this process and get some ideas about how we really think about how we utilize the collaboration aspect, not just the online resources, but that collaboration point and building those forums to really look at this site as something that's active and dynamic. And so with that, David, I'll turn it back over to you to start the mapping exercise.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sarah. So I was just showing you a glimpse of the cooperative education map that we've put together, and that was just a fraction of the information that we've actually collected. So you can see how busy it's already gotten. It's very, very dynamic field that we're working in, and a lot of complexity to it. So it's really wonderful to see this map come together and to be able to elaborate on it with you all today. So I'll show that to you one more time, and then we'll just actually begin with asking you all questions about your desires and needs for this kind of a network. So I will show you that a few of these have already been mapped. And if I can, there we go. This shows all of the folks that have told us that they provide curriculum. Is it legible on the screen there? Can you all read it easily?
Can you make it larger?
What if you X out
Make it
the
larger?
part up on top? If that would
Yeah,
help.
let's
Yeah.
zoom in.
Oh, there, that's better, yeah.
That's better? Okay, good. So I don't remember the number off the top of my head. I think it was somewhere around 10 different organizations gave us input that they provide curriculum to any number of different audiences. And so this is a very superficial look at what those organizations, or rather just who they are, not exactly what they provide, although we have that information as well. We've mapped out the same thing with case studies, how-to manuals, those guides that are just the logistics of running co-ops, and research papers, you know, the background kind of information that we need to do our work. So this is the field that we are working in, and hope to elaborate on that with you today, as I said. So Sarah, do you want to run down the questions as I begin to add to the map?
Yep, that sounds good. So I'm going to just, and hopefully you can see somehow, run down a list of the types of materials that we asked about on our survey, and then maybe with David, would you just like to do a show of hands? I mean, I'm not sure you can see who's in here anymore.
That's true.
Well, I
I
can
think
count. Want me to count? I can count. When people raise their hands.
Okay.
Sure. Do we want to snag organization info from folks as they contribute, or do we want to just do numbers?
We can probably, let's start off with organizations. Let's see how long that takes.
Okay, yeah, it might take a bit long, but we can absolutely try.
So perfect. So we're going to start off with research papers. How many folks have within their organizations have research papers online? Okay. So we have Ontario Co-op, or on Co-op.
USAS Center, Canadian Worker Co-op Federation,
River Falls.
River Falls.
York.
You better put the Canadian Corporate Research Network.
Oh, right, Canadian Corporate Research Network. Is that what we, and your University of Alberta. And my stuff is in a couple of places.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want me to name them or not.
Should we just do numbers? Is that going to be easier?
I think so. I had a hard time following all of that.
Yeah, 1, 2, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay.
Okay, so just separate. Okay. Now you want me to go to needs or just?
Connect that up to research papers.
Okay. All right. The next up is, do you want me to do needs or keep doing with the halves?
Let's keep going with HAPs.
Okay, case studies. Where's case studies online? Oh, 1. Oh, sorry. 3.
All right. Add those.
Curriculum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One more. Oh, it's starting to creep up. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 10.
10 for curriculum.
No one talks about how I can't find curriculum. How-to manuals? Nobody.
Okay.
Materials for management, so for a cooperative? No. Materials for co-op developers? 1, 2, 2. Materials for service providers, such as lawyers or accountants? 1.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Like on our website, we have many of these things, but they're all external links to other places that are curated that we think are doing it well.
Mm-hmm.
Do we include, I don't know, like what level should we be including?
I would say that that's right. And so on the full survey, it asks, so how many of these things do you have or are linked to your site? Or do you have on your site access to? And then is it from an external standpoint or internal? Because all of these things that we found will ultimately be external to us. So we're really trying to get a framework. Because it might be that 10 people raise their hand. We have, curriculum, but actually it's all linked to one. So we're just trying to get a framework. And so this is really sort of a high level understanding of what we're just trying to show. We're trying to find sort of connections. And then once we walk through this process, it's again, so how can we have this conversation completely online? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Best practices, more industry specific information. 2.
Okay.
Principal co-ops and social justice. Oh, I'm sorry. That was short lesson plans. So just 20-minute shorts about co-op principles or social justice. 2.
All right.
Materials for developing capacity for deep listening. Materials for developing. Oh, I'm sorry. 1.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, Dr. Thea. Materials for developing interpersonal community skills. No. Nobody. Materials for developing how to think together. Nobody. Materials for developing capacity for conflict resolution. 1. Sorry. Materials for developing organizational cooperative culture. Nobody. Materials for developing interorganizational regional movement culture. No one. Okay, now we're going to flip to the other side. So generally speaking, how many folks in the room feel like you have a need for more educational resources within the work that you're doing? Majority. All right, we're just going to run through this again. So, hey, Steve, come on in. A need for more research papers? No. Oh, 1. 1. Oh, 2, 2, 2. Oh, 3. Oh, they're creeping up.
Never have.
Yeah. 5, 1, 2, 6. 6. Let's go 6. 6. Case studies?
Yeah.
5, 6, 7. 10. 10.
One person, one vote.
I didn't think like top 2.
No. Just whether you're interested in it.
Curriculum? 6. How-to manuals? One. Oh, two.
Oh, if this is if you have them,
No,
right?
You need them.
This is where you feel the need.
Oh,
Yeah, they
great. Include me on
Can we
that.
maybe note something about curriculums? Because I know when the USDA did like an overview of what was all out there, they found that there's a lot of like the beginner, but to get the advanced curriculum too. Could we maybe make a note about that too, possibly? Because it's really hard to get an in-depth curriculum like the advanced nitty-gritty stuff.
That's a good point. Also, Sarah, I was gonna say, there should be some subcategories in curriculum also, because like my pet peeve is there aren't curriculums that feature people of color, right? So there's some good curriculums out there, but not all of them are relevant. And then curriculums in Spanish, right? There's not that many of those, at least in the US.
Even more languages than Spanish.
Okay.
Too. That's something that
Different
we run into. There's a lot out there, but it's about quality, higher level, and then accessibility for the people that we're working with.
Good, thanks, that's good feedback. Materials for managers. Five.
Hang on just 1 second. I'm a second behind you. That was materials for managers, you said?
Yep. 5.
All right.
Materials for co-op developers. 1. Materials for, I said this one before. Materials for co-op entrepreneurs. 5.
Okay.
Again, materials for needed, again, we're still doing materials for service providers, lawyers, accountants. 1.
Yeah, I've heard people say that we need more. So
Yeah.
I'm up for that.
Okay. Those not in attendance. So closer to 3. Exactly. Best practices or industry specific information. 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. You can go for multiple times. Multiple times.
Yeah, it's not just
Oh,
any need.
Any need.
oh, no, we think it is.
Yeah, we think it is a
Do
need.
you have any? Short lesson plans, again, 20 minutes. 1, 2.
Yeah, Sarah, also on that one, I mean, it's not always that they're short, it's more that they're popular ad or, what's another word for that? More interactive, right?
Great.
Great point.
Materials for developing capacity for deep listening.
Can someone explain a little bit what that means?
Because we might want it if we knew better what it was.
Right. I personally need that.
That's obvious, it was explained 10 minutes ago.
More materials on conflict resolution.
I would say if you were at the first 2 sessions this morning, the plenary and the workshop that stayed, that conversation was, I would say, is about deep listening. Isabel, do you want to say more about that? Because you guys brought that up, right?
And it, yeah, I mean, it's a concept and there's
Yeah.
just how important it is to invest the time in this.
Right. to hear people, to listen to alternative,
Yeah.
other ideas, to, you know, it's another part of that, meet people where they are kind of thing.
Thanks.
So then, yes.
Yeah. Yes. Three for deep listening skills.
3? Okay.
Materials for developing interpersonal community skills.
So what was it?
Interpersonal community skills. Okay, no one.
Okay.
So Sarah, what's the threshold here? I mean, all these things are potentially useful, so.
Well, this is really for you. So in the work you do, or your sort of perspective, because ultimately the idea is to create connections then. Or, and then once you create a connection, is there a opportunity for collaboration or sharing or that sort of thing? So sure, there's lots of needs for cooperative education, but in my daily life, I can maybe think of 3 of these that would really contribute to the work that I'm doing. And so, so I'd say either really focus on your work that you're doing in terms of answers.
But the next step would be, right, the 3 people that said we need more deep listening, maybe the 3 of us would then collaborate on creating
Exactly.
some materials.
Exactly.
And try to do it through this online portal or whatever.
Yeah. Which is, here you go. So materials for developing how to think together. Good lead-in. But no one thinks we need it. Oh, 1, all right. We have 3. Materials for developing capacity for conflict resolution. 2 in the back. 1, 4, 5, 6. 6.
3. And sorry, I missed that one, Sarah. I was recording the other one. What was the question?
I'm sorry, it was materials for developing capacity for conflict resolution. And
Conflict resolution. Great. Got it.
Was 6.
Thank you.
Materials for developing organizational cooperative culture. 7.
7. Okay.
Materials for developing organizational oh, I just read that, sorry. Materials for developing interorganizational, regional, or movement culture. 6.
Okay.
Great. Okay. So again, the purpose of our surveys, and will continue to be, to really start to identify where are their needs and where are their supply. And within the survey, we ask a lot more detail about the type of curriculum or the type of resources, who you are as an organization, who do you think uses these materials, and how do you disseminate them. So we ask not only do you disseminate these online, but are they also part of an in-person program that you have? So we can, again, have an understanding about dissemination. Ellen, do you have a question?
I was just going to say that there's probably subcategories, as Jessica said, under many of these. And one of the ones that occurs to me, because I'm an academic, is like under research papers. Some of them may be not very accessible, but a lot of people give presentations, or they may have something else that explains the research paper that could flag people's interest, and then they would know to talk to you. And some younger academics than me more regularly write blogs, for example, and that often refers to research papers as well, and people may get ideas of interacting, because what worries me is a lot of this stuff is very flat. And I thought we wanted to build an online community, so we need places for people to think, oh, good, that's who I should go and talk to about that, or maybe that person would be able to direct me to X or Y.
Well, that is a fantastic lead-in, but let's take these guys first.
So I would highly recommend you come to my session on Friday about introducing the Emerging Co-op Researchers Forum.
Yeah.
There's an online discussion forum exactly for that purpose.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
well, this may merge those two things, but I was thinking maybe this thing could almost have like personal ads between researchers and co-ops, because I think of this particular things like social science research that needs to be done about effective practices, and I can't find it. But
And
then
I
again,
bet you it's being done.
that's what I find is all of a sudden I find someone's been working for 20 years on a subject that I'm working on my daily life as a developer, and we've never had any communication before. So some way that you could put up, this is what we're interested in, and someone else would say, oh, I already know research, let's refer them. Or we would love to support our people being interviewed about this subject if there's someone who wants to do that research.
The other thing I have to remember because of my teaching hat is that we have grad student theses and they haven't been identified yet. And sometimes they're actually in a relatively public domain, a little bit easier than journal articles that you sometimes have to pay for. I have undergraduate student research papers. Other people may have those as well.
On the Canadian research.
I haven't signed up. I haven't got much farther than that. But I'm just saying it needs to be linked in here too, because my students do comparatives across the US and Canadian cooperatives, for example. So people might find some of that research interesting. And the undergraduate's pretty easy about signing off copyright stuff for educational purposes anyway.
So leading up that, being a grad student, trying to get a topic for my thesis and trying to find things that have been done already has been extremely difficult, looking at like Google Scholar and trying to find other places.
Yeah,
this
I think you have to
research has
go
been
with
done.
it.
But
These
so
just
looking at that, I know you said that that was the full, the survey, the names of the places.
Right.
I only saw University of Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
So are we reaching out to a lot of the other universities that
Right.
have these centers, and how can we connect? Because there's some that are connected with a few, but how do we get them all? That's a big concern. Like as a student, I know that NDSU is connected with, say, Oklahoma and some other ones, but they're connected with, now with a lot of the other ones too, like University of Saskatchewan and everything else that could really be helpful to students that want to study and giving us more initiative. That would be really helpful too, especially with getting stuff for the research, because it's really hard to find.
Michael?
Yeah, I'm not sure this has already been covered, and I'm not sure I totally understand the exercise, but forgive me. One of the things we have on our website increasingly is videos of guest lectures, where we have a seminar series and we bring in an expert or somebody who's an international scholar or whatever, and they're nicely videoed, and that's a nice thing as a package. And I think there are some other kinds of movement initiatives that maintain a speakers bureau. And there's also a kind of thing, I don't know the proper name for it, but where it's sort of a lending library of people. You can get someone who'll come and tell you their story, or they're not exactly speakers, but they could act as mentors, or so that you could ask for their time or their attention, whatever to your issue. The last thing I wanted to say is there's an example of this that is quite well developed called the Digital Library of the Commons, which is maintained, some of you know about it quite a lot. It's maintained by an International Association for the Study of the Commons. It's a huge repository of articles and things. Overlapping with cooperatives, because they are interested in cooperatives, and we should be interested in the commons as a theory for understanding cooperatives.
Okay. So the next part of this, and essentially what we're going to be doing is continuing this conversation. So what we just did is, again, in kind of a flat way, identify who has resources and who needs them. But the point is, how do you facilitate that conversation online? So in a sort of a brainstorming way, when you think about resources or collaborations that you had in the past, what does that process look like? Who do you reach out to, or how could you translate that into an online community format? And so we've heard some good ideas already. So a personal ad. In terms of the survey question, who are you reaching out to? Anyone that wants to fill out our survey and be a part of this, because the value of the network is
how many people are participating in it. And its success is really measured in the enormity of it, really. And leaving anyone out, it doesn't really serve our purpose in any way. And so we'll hand out a sheet at the end of the session to ask how either you want to be involved, whether it's to fill out the survey or resources that you have, or be part of a pilot project. But certainly there isn't criteria in terms of this is who we're looking for now. And so to go back sort of to the next part of the exercise, again, is creating community. So how do we translate and facilitate the conversation that we just had into an online community? How do you reach out to people now in your daily life, or who do you reach out to? And how do you think that activity could be taken place in an online format? And so I'll, again, be jotting down answers, but are there other suggestions and thoughts about how you currently go about collaboration process, or where you do look for resources that in some way could be part of either forums or conversations put online? Does that make sense?
Sarah, can I jump in with a quick thought?
Yes, please.
Great. So this came to me as we were talking about the methodology of our surveys. We reached out to our immediate networks for the most part for the information that has come in on the map that we were displaying. So we look to Cooperation Works, we look to current Cultivate users and so on, but this is our opportunity to hear from the wider array of folks like you all who are in the room. So it's great to hear that there are universities, for example, that offer more and who we can tap into some more. So would love to hear more examples like that, and Sarah teed it up perfectly.
Justin, did you have?
Yeah, just to say, like, I think it's pretty thin right now as far as like what is out there online. I think there's like pretty good reasons for that. As far as the fact that this is like co-op community is very, very large, but it's also what exists in all these different places. It's very fragmented, so you kind of expect those discussions to happen in person, like at conferences. It's like not really that surprising. But also the nature of education is that it has a lot to do, I think, with it's experiential. And I wouldn't expect online communities to do anything but sort of augment the work that is done experientially with co-op members. They don't have to be within the same co-op, within the same city. And having them like work in hubs together and having online resources be there to support the work that they're doing as peers. But the treasurer of a food co-op and the treasurer of a housing co-op in the same town probably have a lot more to do with each other and a lot more fruitful engagement than some expert that is trying to deliver that information to them from another country or something like that. I think I've never seen anything that's captured that yet.
Yeah.
You may already have the basis of this from one of the things you showed earlier, but I've always been interested in a cooperatively written guide on cooperatives, how to. I think there's a lot of good materials out there, but they're scattered. And if it just had an index, like these are the different things you should know when you're doing startup, and then everyone could say, oh, well, here's my evaluation forms. Here's how we do training about conflict resolution. Just dump it in there, and then people could rate it. If this is more useful, it'd be an ongoing resource. I think we have a lot of great resources, and they're scattered now. There's research papers I've never heard of. We would love if we found them. Those of us who have that different knowledge, if we had a structure just to dump it into, I think it would be great.
Okay. It's more of an open portal that's known.
Kind of a curated format to put things in that people can then find.
On that, if you could like rate the resources too, then and like so that you could also, if you didn't want to work through all of them, you could just be like, oh, these are the ones that are being used most often. I also just want to reiterate, I think it's really important to think about translation in this because it starts to just kind of act like a gatekeeper where it's like we have to act like I have to access information to give to other people. And I would love to maybe have less words. I think you mentioned it, videos, even comics, like things that are accessible.
That's a great point, and I'm glad you brought it up. And one of the things we're looking at now is how to translate the survey both into French and Spanish, particularly for our North American members. And then what does the process for translation look like for resources? You know, is there a way to say this particular resource is really useful, so how do we invest to get that translated into multiple languages? What does that process look like? Because not everything necessarily needs to be translated into all languages, but it would be great to have a place of collaboration to say, you know, how can we get this in another language, and then what does that process look like? Definitely.
But I think you heard her that she's also talking beyond language. She's talking about knowledge
Yes.
translation,
Yep.
which could involve things that she mentioned, comics or something else, some other way of packaging and delivering, but also digesting and somehow making accessible. And it's a two-way process too. You know, so I'm hearing that a number of people think there are projects that can come out of this to co-create, co-generate materials that need to be properly resourced and sourced with the cases, examples, the stories, as we heard this morning, that need to be told. And I have a naive question. You know, some of these kinds of projects end up being something that I hear is called a wiki. You know, that there's a kind of opportunity for people to add in a voluntaristic way, but moderated, to the entry, for lack of a better word, you know? And it strikes me that one of the big sources that my students use is Wiki, right? They go to Wiki. So we better be very sure that it's properly linked, but also that Wiki is a place where we're putting some energy to make sure that they are properly, or that our cooperative interests are properly covered there, which I suspect they are likely. I don't know. And so I guess those were comments and questions for whoever like to comment back.
David, do you have any comments about the wiki, as that's really cultivate.coop's foundation?
Sure, it is. So Wikipedia is basically a general version of Cultivate. And I say that recognizing that they kind of had to jump on it. But the function, the entire process of adding to Cultivate, everything about it is exactly the same. In fact, it runs the very same software that Wikipedia runs on. So Cultivate is definitely friendly to that kind of a user who can contribute in that fashion, who is well-versed in Wikipedia and everything. We can also, as you're saying, cross-post to popular sources and ensure that we're well represented there. And this isn't a direct response, but I wanted to elaborate on what folks were saying earlier, that the plan for this hub as we're going forward is to develop maybe events or other sorts of resources that can augment the online presence. So things like comics are a great idea, ways of getting that accessible knowledge out there. So love to hear more in that vein.
So I just have a question about in terms of how things get linked, because especially for academics now, a lot of people have things like Google Scholar, and those are already archived, and there's no usually any copyright issues because they use pre-publication versions of things. Is there any way, if we want to build in a number of research papers and things like that, to link through Google Scholar or things?
One of the questions we have is how we work, or how do we get this into a workflow that already exists? So can I put that question on a back burner and just go to, I just want to touch a little bit more about this online community more, because a lot of the were you going to say something? Because a lot of the ideas that we're talking about now, or are, you know, comics, what does that look like? And so what I'd really like to figure out how to get at is, if you wanted to develop a comic, let's say, what's the process that you would go through in terms of the development process? Would you call specific people? Would you, what resources would you look for? And when you look at that activity, and a lot of times right now it might be an email to a specific person that you know, but how do we translate that and put it into some sort of forum? Is it just creating a forum where you can start a forum and post it out to everyone? But we're trying to figure out what the actions look like that you typically take now in either looking for resources and creating them and trying to translate that and create a space online. Sure.
Specific to your point on that, right now, what we do as a trade association and foundations, call who we know,
right?
Email people that we know. And so one of the things I just want to, since we're on this point, just say as a need is a forum on, or some kind of way on cultivate.coop to just throw that question out to the void or to the collective group of individuals that are interested or that have maybe subscribed, or I don't know what exactly the process would be to do that, because we all have, a wealth of information, or somebody has been working on something for 20 years that we've been looking for, interested in, and don't know about it. So that would be extremely helpful. And I know that all of this is difficult to manage within, a single platform. But yeah, if that would be helpful. Jessica, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's okay, that was good. I don't mean to dominate. I just had a couple of examples that I wanted to give out of ways that these groups that I've been involved in have tried to reach out. So the Solidarity Economy, the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network, a subgroup of us were worried about racism and colonial mentality in the solidarity economy. So we actually put together a webinar of examples of groups that were actually addressing this issue. So we decided we didn't want a whole webinar about complaints about the issue. We wanted to actually showcase groups that were already doing something. So we put together a webinar, but then after the webinar, we realized we needed to do something more. So one idea was to do more webinars, but that was a lot of work. So what we did was we attached the topic to the next national conference that was going on. So we ended up with a whole plenary and track at the next conference. So people who still wanted to talk about it and new people got exposed to it or whatever. So I think that, again, back to ACE's thing, we could start doing webinars and then conclude them or continue them or whatever when we do meet face-to-face once a year or something like that. GEO also did something similar with our Advancing the Development of Worker Co-ops. When we first started, I think it was 6 years ago now, it was an online conversation. We actually we sent out emails to people who want to talk about this topic. We created a listserv, a group listserv of all the people who said they were interested, and then we, like every month, we set out a new list of questions, and then anybody in that list could answer the questions, and then we tried to summarize them. I think we eventually made a Google document that people could get, and then we also ended up the next year, this was about a year's process, we ended up with an issue of our online newsletter where we asked some of the people who had given long responses to write an article that would go in the online newsletter, and then we actually had a conference. So that's another thing there. I'm actually making a graphic novel out of my book, Collective Courage. And that process right now has been finding the artist first. And that was really just actually, what should I call her? An interested student who happened to see a Black graphic artist give a lecture and liked his materials, shared it with me, approached the guy. She had to actually bother him for about 2 months. And then he finally looked at some of my stuff and said, oh yeah, that would be a great idea. And so then we just talked. And then meanwhile, I also realized that I need a script, right? I can't just give him the 300 page. I said, okay, go, draw, right? So then I just talked to Esteban Kelly about how do I find a graphic author who could co-author a script with me. So then we could give the artist the script. And then when I talked to the artist, he was like, you know, I'm really busy, but he has another collaborator who could, he and the two people could do the art anyway. So it seems like it's a lot of it is who knows who, and you start the conversation and somebody else connects you with somebody else. So I suppose if there was a way to do that online also, I don't mean necessarily for that particular topic, but I'm just saying, it's, you know, because it's not, some of it is just who knows who, but I suppose we have a larger audience if we can do it through the web, right? And say, I'm trying to do this project, who knows a good artist, or something like that. But it's definitely been these piecing together, right? I mention it to this person, and that person says, oh, you should talk to this person. And then I don't know how you do the hounding. Because most of us ignore the hounds over the internet, right? So I guess at some point you might have to pick up the phone.
I'll just say, I don't know what Shara said, that's like my exact process, but one of the places I've had the best luck, which is not very savvy, I guess, is like Facebook, because of the tagging mechanism, where it would just be like, oh, so talk to so-and-so, and then it's just like a instant connection there.
I'm wondering if this community could have some forum where we actually solicited things from people, especially in video formats. I'm thinking of an interesting online community called edge.org, which is about science and alternative culture, where they always put out a question each year. They ask correspondents to answer it, and at the end you have a book that maybe thematically we put out a question. Like, I've been talking to a couple of friends of mine who are formerly incarcerated that they could use examples of other people, and we started talking about, we should make a film that's like, why co-op? Our co-ops just for hippies. And we have a bunch of people who did not get that stereotype talking about their own experience, how they maybe had that idea, but it actually spoke to their culture, and they were able to change things over time. And then we could have a base to make a documentary out of that at some point.
I'd like to echo that. I think there are lots of would-be, wannabe filmmakers out there, young filmmakers. I know a few, and I'm always thinking, oh, I have about 50 topics I'd like to make a film about, but I think we need to, there are filmmaking cooperatives too, but I think it's amazing actually the lack of resources. And I would like to mention cartoons as well. I was at a refugee fundraising dinner the other day, which was a collaboration in our community between the Jewish community and the Islamic Association, bringing a refugee family from. And they showed a cartoon made in Europe about the refugee problem. And in 10 minutes, they encapsulated the depth of the problem and also the capacity that was there to deal with this problem, and the fact that it shouldn't be overwhelming for Europe to take on this problem. And it was beautifully done. And it was a cartoon, well-researched and well graphically exciting and engaging. And I mentioned podcasts as well. Canada, I hear several American guests and friends here beginning to sound Canadian. They're all saying sorry. I think podcasts, because the CBC does a lot of podcasts, and those are radio shows. And I love radio. I like the graphic novel.
Awesome, thanks. David, did you have any thoughts or comments, or did you want to move into the workflow question?
I just have to admit I'm an avid podcast listener, and I love that suggestion. I know of only one that's about co-ops so far, so I'd be thrilled to hear more of them.
Geo just did two. Geo just launched 2 podcasts on co-op.
Oh, great. I wasn't aware. I'll definitely look.
I'm just writing this out.
So would you like me to ask this question, Sarah?
Sure, but before you do, just one more comment, Shar is in the audience.
It's just a question, and maybe you'll get to this. I know that you said that at the end, you're gonna pass out something of interest to folks, but for those that aren't here and for those of us that, want to spread the word on helping you collect information or, discern what the needs and wants are, how do we go about doing that?
Well, I would say either reach out to myself or David or Ajua, who at Geo is our other sort of staffer that's working on this. We can send you a link to the survey, which we would highly encourage you to disseminate to your own networks. Definitely. I think we were, timid isn't really the right word, but we did have a selection of folks that we sent it to first that was maybe more of the development community to just see what the data look like. And then from there to figure out, are we gathering the right data and how do we move forward? And so as David had said, now is a great time to sort of open this up to a much broader population to gather as much information as possible now. Any other questions before? Okay, go ahead with workflow, David.
Sure. So our earlier conversation touched on this already a little bit, but we're curious about the way that you get these materials out into the world when you have them, and what it would take for an online community to be relevant in the way that it is the go-to place for you to publish this sort of information. So perhaps to seed this conversation, I'll share an idea that we had about grant funding, for example. If you get some amount of money to produce some kind of resource that is shareable in this fashion, could we begin a conversation with funders about the outcome of that grant and where it ought to be shared, for example, on cultivate.coop, or if, for example, we were working with folks that in the States received RCDG, Rural Cooperative Development Grant funding, could we perhaps be written into that structure? So like we're able to get a piece of small pots of grant money at all of our various organizations to fuel common effort. So how do those two ideas strike you, and do you have any more of your own thinking to add?
Sure. To your first question about how do we currently disseminate, I think we're going to go back to our own networks through our, newsletters, electronic correspondence, also, social media. That I think is how we currently disseminate our information. And then secondly, about your question about writing and, having a small portion or a portion of any grant request to include, funds to be able to, contribute the information to cultivate.coop. I think that's completely possible. I think it would need to be made clear what amount of funds for an organization or what is needed on cultivate.coop. I'll just use that. What is needed as resources to be able to do that, or what staff time on the other side is needed for the staff to be able to submit something to cultivate.coop, and in what format and context, needs to be done. But I personally, as somebody who requests grants, would be more than happy to do that, because grant funders see that as the more the information gets out to people, that's a benefit to their respective organizations as well, and as well as your own.
Wonderful.
So, Daryl, your question before was about Google and how you're already.
Well, more on the research side of things.
Okay.
You're talking about ResearchGate and academia.com, things like that.
Okay. And how are we linked to those?
Well, can there be, because,
Right.
you know,
Well, that's another one of the questions, and something that we ask in the survey too is, you know, what's the technology that you're currently utilizing? Because then there's a compatibility issue in question. Is that, you know, how is it that again, that we can link to all of these things? And so that is something we'd like to figure out in the most simplistic way, and don't know the answer right now, but to get a understanding of the landscape out there of, you know, this organization uses this site or this, you know, and then what from a technology standpoint people are using. That's part of our goal, is to just kind of gain that understanding, because if we could link to it, that's
because a
optimal.
lot of the non-academics, we know all the research work out there, and a lot of the research work is behind paywalls, but there are copies that can be found in other places. So
It gets interesting because, you know, the paywall thing, so for example, we have access to hundreds of journals through our library at the university, but obviously if you're not a student or professor, that's not going to be possible for you, and you have to pay like $15 just to view one paper or whatever. So figuring out how we can do that in a legal, I don't know what the ramifications of that are, so it'd be interesting to see. Because even sometimes it's hard for me to, if say our library doesn't have access to that journal, well, I don't get to read that paper then, because I'm gonna pay $50 to read, you know, just one paper. I mean, I'm a student, you know, that's how it is, but I'm sure the same thing is you can't just spend money, and what if you pay to read that paper is totally irrelevant anyway, so you'd hate to spend money to do that. So figuring out how we get past that, you know, wall.
And some of that, I mean, I know there's some of us who put some of our writings on our own web pages.
Right.
And then sometimes there's the working paper version, which is the pre-publication version. That's on a website or something. So it may be we would need to pay someone to kind of look for those things once you knew at least the name of an author or someone that you thought you would want. But also I was thinking if we were linking to Center for Wisconsin or USask Center, maybe it would be that however, whatever stuff they are able to list, we just link to their website.
So Gerald, just to your point, I mean, when I started working on the research network, I tried out academia.edu and ResearchGate and found, and all these other, you know, Mendeley, and there's so many of these things. They're all geared so narrowly in purpose. If you really wonder what they were thinking. So this academia.edu is really good at sending you discrete papers that are on topics that you narrowly define, but then it's terrible at actually letting you know who is doing that, and you can't submit, you know, things very easily. And yeah, I think you said Google Scholar is actually really good at finding stolen documents. And I was a student, that's seriously what it was, that, and going to fellow students and saying, can you legally share your password with me so I can use your university's access to their things? And that's how I, you know, managed to work that out. I think we all, I don't know, maybe you're not so blessed as to have friends. Sketchy like that. I have lots of sketchy friends. To David's point, I think it sounds like there's two different sort of avenues, that like the way that you would try to approach educators and get those education materials into the hands of educators is really different than the way you would get it into the hands of people that are receiving the education. I don't know how to put that. And for the latter case, it is just Wikipedia. It is basically, it is existing platforms that, you know, are not, they're distasteful to a lot of us ideologically, but that is where the eyeballs are, and people can find it. It's extremely, extremely accessible. I don't think we should shy away from using that. And like any articles that are, you know, I see on Cultivate that are like, what is a worker co-op? I kind of wanted to see that on Wikipedia, where more people are going to see it, and where, you know, we could be active participants in these existing platforms, you know, to a degree that we aren't always as a movement.
Would there be a way maybe to get, since Wikipedia, you can kind of add your own content, would there be a way to link that information in Wikipedia to be like, look at cultivate.coop to maybe get the word out? I don't know how that would work.
You can cite as a reference on the page, but kind of why would you? you know?
Right.
Like, and it's just for a site of what is a worker co-op.
Cultivate Co-op could have its own wiki.
It is.
They do. They
No,
do.
I mean a wiki on Wikipedia.
Oh, it's like, yeah.
On Wikipedia, there is a co-op group, subgroup of editors that edit co-op pages. It's severely kept, and of course anonymous, and you know these people are. Tom Pearson said, like, he doesn't know who he's ever been able to figure out who it is, but there's somebody who's acquainted himself, the worker co-op god of Wikipedia. Or you come at it by mass action and state. You have to fight, you have to kind of fight your way into the inside co-op. But there is a co-op group. You can join the co-op editing group on Wikipedia. And, you know, to be an author on Wikipedia requires that you be a member for what, 3 seconds, right? I think they limit you, it's like, you have to at least be logged in for more than 10 seconds. So, you know, but it takes a concerted effort to get into that inner circle, and that would mean, again, having a work plan to do that. But Wikipedia is available. I mean, there is a co-op group and network on it now. I just don't know who any of them.
Right.
And they're here.
Nobody will mess up.
Yeah. But if you put up a co-op page, someone will come in there and they'll tell you why your page is wrong. In fact, they'll probably edit your book.
But it's all.
Tell you.
I know, right? I've heard of that too, right? The author can't even go back because somebody else will edit it.
Yeah.
And the author can't even fix it.
Yes, same with Reddit too, they have a pretty large, it's like 3,500 people on the subreddit for co-op groups as well. But one thing I found interesting about like academia.edu is that it gives you your analytics, so it tells you what key phrases people are looking at, what they're actually Googling, and to find your papers. So that would be a super cool collaboration between people to anyone who has papers on academia.edu that are getting quite a few views, to just take note of what those keywords are, and we can share that globally so that we know how best to like get search engine optimization on our papers as well.
Great. Were there some other hands?
If it's more relevant to this, I just wanted to circle back to how we started the conversation and something Tim said. I wonder, like with the grants too, if there could be something fun to do, like what Tim mentioned, where like maybe there's just a theme for the year, and you go in and you get a grant for a certain amount of money, and then you divide that out to build those curriculums with that, build that information around the theme. That would be amazing. This year for TACO, we got this like small $10,000 grant, and we opened up an application process for it, and we were like, oh, it's probably just going to be the people we tell to apply for it. We call it like a catapult grant, so they're small amounts of money. We had so many applications and people that just came out of the woodworks, and so it was really helpful to start to identify who these people are that we don't know.
Awesome. Thanks.
That could be used with this collectively oriented guide too, because it could be useless because it'll be too much information. But if we could have a grant and then commission people section by section to do an intro that then links to things, that would be really useful. The other thing is really more of a nerdy thing, but it might be worth Cultivate's might be in Cultivate's interest to actually have a little section. How do you cross-pollinate us with these other things? So if you see something on here and you think it should be linked to a Wikipedia page, here's a little promo on how you do that. If you think it should be linked to these academic things, here's a way to do that.
Awesome.
And also, like one of the keys on Wikipedia is having a third-party source. That's what keeps your page from getting bumped off. So cultivate.coop would be a third-party source, right, to keep the Wikipedia page live.
I guess, Democracy Collaborative, if we can be helpful, that way, just let us know. But we do some of that already, I guess, and we've developed pages and so forth. So.
So I still want to continue the conversation, but I'm just going to start to pass out these sheets that just ways that you can get involved or want to get involved. That would be fantastic. So, Justin?
I don't know if this is the right time to ask this, but I'm just curious, with the site, are you interested in it still being essentially like a static web page? in perpetuity, or are you talking about inserting forums or
Right.
what?
So that's really the online community part. I mean, in my head, I really see these as two distinctive things, but really feed into one another.
Okay.
So you have this resource library, and if it's linked and has things that we've created, but on the other half is a very dynamic interactive site that has forums, that all different kinds of forums. And I encourage you to look on let's see, it's community.tes.com, and that's the online community I spoke of for the teachers, which it really looks at. It has all different kind of forums, and all grades, or just any kind of really support group, and really someone just throws out a topic on there, and people can decide to sign up, and then they're all kept in from a historical standpoint, so you can go back and look at them from a resource. But I do look at that side as really conversational in a way. I mean, it's a community, it's active, and so one of the tricks is to just figure out how you get people to utilize it from a behavioral standpoint, because they're not already doing that already. It's not something that people are used to. And so, how do we train, for lack of a better word, people to think about, oh, I want this, I'm going to go to the online community. And I think that's how we sort of build the robustness and the richness and the usefulness of it, really.
On that point, there is a way, if you're interested in going that route.
Yeah.
There is something called Buddy Press.
Yes.
Okay, you're familiar. Okay, yeah. So just being able to make your own custom Facebook, basically.
Right.
That also can serve as a wiki in a weird way. It just, you have to have money and or expertise to keep it going, because the code is not super friendly if you try to do the totally cheap version.
Yeah.
It needs someone who knows what they're doing to massage it. But it could be great for that behavioral aspect.
And that's something else we're trying to figure out, right? I mean, eventually we want it to be a pull, but now it's a push, right? Someone has to be pushing this content out and pushing ways to be involved, whether it's a question or something. And so at what point does it turn and become a pull, so the online community pulls people in and they know? And so I don't know when that point is. It's something we have to figure out. But to be sort of that push, you need staff or volunteers or someone, which maybe it's recruited people or what have you. So again, there are questions that we're examining, and the more people that we can get to be part of the conversation, again, I feel the better it's going to be. Sure.
Maybe I missed this, but is CENet the cultivate.coop?
Nope. So that is, I always call this the online community. So it's cooperative. It's
Cooperative Education Network.
That's it. Cooperative Education
Network. We don't really have a flashy name as yet.
So yeah, sorry, I should have referenced that. Any other thoughts on usage or workflow? Again, again, a lot of this is behavioral, and how do we start to think about that aspect of it? Any thoughts? David, any other thoughts or comments or?
Yeah, we had a few comments about attribution, kind of loosely, and it's something that we've needed to give some real consideration to. They're coming from private sources, these papers and other certain bits of information, and how can we respect that while also making it public, because everything on cultivate.coop is editable and public. So if you publish something that you worked very hard on and want to maintain intellectual property control over, it's going to be difficult for you to translate that, right? So we're trying to give some advanced consideration. It's been very helpful to hear your feedback today about what that looks like. And yeah, I think that's all.
David, in terms of everything being on Cultivate is editable, if you didn't want it edited, couldn't you just put a link to where you have it on a different website that's not editable?
Yes, that's true. And that's part of our consideration, right, is how much do we actually host on the website versus how much do we allow to live in other places. there's a difficulty and attention to that, which is that links change and people will move their PDF around, and then that'll be a dead link on Cultivate. So this central hub is no longer providing what it needs to be. And then, of course, if it's there and available, then it's editable and people can play with it. We also don't want to necessarily host all of that information. We want to ensure that we're pointing people to the resources that are out there. You know, if we want to send somebody over to the Democracy Collaborative website, we send them in that direction and let them know that they exist and that that's an important resource for our community. So still trying to walk that line and make some decisions about how much gatekeeping we do in that regard.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I can say a little bit about that. I mean, we, you know, communitywalk.org, you know, the sort of the rule is that everything has a bibliography entry, and except for like the general pages that are proprietary, if you will, and that's, so I mean, you could decide. So I don't know. If the goal is for everything to be editable, then that kind of means everything is editable. That's the purpose of the site. Or you could have a portion of the site that's, you know, recommended PDFs, and then you have them on your site, you know, mirrored just like we do, and you list them, and those aren't editable. And so that would be a mixed model if you wanted to go to that. But it's pretty easy not to have them editable if you want to do that. It's sort of up to you guys and what you're trying to achieve.
Sure. Just a suggestion, and maybe this has already been thought of. I know we're all on a lot of listservs, you know, and you can pick whether or not you want to, you know, certain kind of information, but I think in this instance, it may actually be helpful for those interested in the room and elsewhere, that if they wanted to know if something was downloaded, you know, on the site about worker-owned cooperatives, that they would then receive, you know, an email that said something was just posted on worker-owned co-ops, or, you know, if they'd be willing to answer a question that went out, you know, to the collective group about food co-ops, or a general question, you could say, yes, I'd like to be notified about that, and then you can participate. Because I think that one of the issues with a lot of people we're all busy. And I personally am not going to be checking the website every single day for, you know, what's new and what's not, and what's been posted and what hasn't been posted. So maybe just a thought on, you know, again, I know we all receive a multitude of newsletters, and sometimes we get to read them, sometimes we don't. But, you know, maybe something, I don't know if it would logistically be feasible to, you know, on a monthly basis, or you know, every other week, put, you know, what's been posted in an email, what's been posted, you know, so you can scan through, and it, you know, it'd be just on everything, you know, so not necessarily something you may be interested in, but you know that it's out there regardless. Just kind of a dump of what's been, or digest.
Yeah, or like a dashboard. This is new this week or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you could, I mean, that would be fairly easy if you wanted to set up an automatic flag, right? And then it, you know, when you put it up, it says new automatically, and then, you know, however many days you set, 30 days, 60 days, then it deflags. If you want to do that.
And I wonder if a social network aspect could be built into it. So if I logged in as me, and I friended Justin, because I know that things that are interesting to Justin are interested to me, or Steve, you know, whatever, then those things would be more likely to be flagged to me. Like, you know, Steve said that was a really useful article, rated that as a useful article, then I'm more likely to go to it, that kind of thing.
David, I'm not sure if a lot of these things that have been mentioned are on networks like Michael says on ResearchGate around the academic side of things. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but maybe looking at it might give you some ideas around some of these things, because you've got all your co-authors and you can ask people for things and you can ask questions and different things like this. So maybe it's just a place to get some ideas from it and how those might be operationalized.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you.
I have sort of a general question, David. I don't know if this, so, so cultivate.coop, as I understand, is Tessa, right? That's who's behind it, or?
True, we created it, yep.
What? Yeah. And so it could just be, it could just stay as it is as a project of Tessa, or there could be some kind of, I mean, we're doing this in this workshop sort of, but you know, if it was helpful, if what you saw it was as sort of a repository of co-op education resources, and maybe there could be a more formal once-a-year review with ACE, and that would actually then feed into where you try to prioritize development in the year to come or something like that. I don't know if it's worth formalizing that, but that's just a question if you thought about that.
Sure. You know, the question of authorship also came up in terms of who owns Cultivate, right? Because with this collaboration, we're opening the doors very, very wide, particularly to ACE and Geo in order to add their networks in, and then for all of you as contributors. So we've needed to balance Tessa's ownership over the project with this sort of public concern that it has. And I think that after this first year of the collaboration, we'll do precisely as you're saying. It'll be a review that feeds into the longevity of the project and helps to shape it. And I think it's a good idea to have these periodic reviews, or, you know, some sort of peer oversight over the entire scope of the project. That makes sense to me.
Yes.
And I'm looking at like built-in incentives to contribute, like Reddit Gold or like upvoting, so that just in terms of like creating a culture of peer support, I guess, or if your thing gets upvoted and then it's featured on the front page, that you're sort of crowdsourcing information that is like internally of interest to a majority of people in that sense. It might make a good incentive. Like I know academia.edu does, like if you get so many hits in a certain period of time, you get in the top 2% or something like that, and then you're able to, I don't know, expand your reach that way.
Great.
Yeah, that's a great thought. I think that we've only kind of jokingly talked about incentivizing things because at Tessa we develop games and whatnot. So we thought, oh yeah, we'll make a game of it. And it hasn't actually gotten far, but I think that there is a real value to that in terms of the way that people engage with the internet, right? So I think there's something to be explored there.
I just remembered something that I was going to say before, actually two things. One is, you know, the students are talking about the problem of access to articles with non-students on a larger scale. And sometimes when you publish, you have an option to do open access. And so I think it's interesting, it's quite a lot that's on open access by one way or another. So it's interesting to figure out how to encourage that among cooperative scholars, whether there can be a fund for that, because you have to pay the page rates to get to open access to Sage or whoever would be making money off your downloads otherwise. The other thing I wanted to say is there are other networks, and I was having a hard time reading the graphics because I'm at the back of the room here. But there's the European Research Institute on Cooperative and Social Enterprises, EURICSE. URICSE. Many of you know it. You probably know it too. But there are other networks that are maintaining pretty good collections that are quite downloadable and so on. ILO, International Labor Organization, has its own cooperative branch. Download a lot there. So I think it is important to connect people to those things, and partly it's just helping people know where to look. You know, it's like
Right.
we're all we're not all reference librarians on co-ops. They're
Right.
precious few in
Right.
America, you know.
And that's just to go to that point, is that we want to promote the folks that have created these resources. We don't necessarily need to be the one that everyone comes to. We definitely want to promote our peers. But if we're the place that people can come to and collaborate and talk and find these resources and then go out in a more organized fashion, and it's more efficient and more people are able to access it.
Well, you have a special location that the RIXI doesn't have on co-op education. I understand the distinction. They're not the same.
Right. So, okay, looks like we are at time. So just want to thank everyone for coming, and thanks for joining us, David.
Yeah, thank you all. This is great.
And if you have those sheets, or if you have any other ideas, again, I encourage you to reach out to David, myself, or Ajwa with LTO.
Sarah, people did ask for the link to the survey. How are you going to get that out to people?
Well, one of the questions on the sheet is I am interested in filling out the survey and ask for their contact information. So I'll send it to them.
So you're waiting for people
So
to give you the
push.
contact information.
Push
And I'm just
right.
wondering if the link could be on Cultivate's webpage or something.
Well, it's on social media. Yep,
Oh, it is.
yep. So we have put it out there, but again,
Oh, well,
I can just send it to you directly.
for 3 months now. Very silly job.
Thanks, David.
All right, bye all. Thank you.
I'm John McCall. That's my nickname.
Okay.
John,